Section 324 relates to reducing America's total nuclear stockpile. According to the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute yearbook for 2021, the state of nuclear weapons in the world is roughly this. The U.S. has about 5,500. About a third of these are deployed and ready to go. The rest are in storage or in other forms. Russia has about 6,200, and they have about a quarter of them deployed and ready to go, and the rest are in storage or in other forms. The rest of the world combined only has about 1,400 nuclear weapons. That's spread out other 7 nations that possess nuclear weapons. And so the United States and Russia have the vast majority of nuclear weapons in the world. And talked about this recent statement. The United States, Russia, China, France, and the UK have all agreed that we should prevent an arms race that would benefit none and endanger all. And it's frustrating to hear about the developments in the Ukraine and hear the drums of war beating once again. But in the larger context of American relations, again, a nuclear war must be avoided, cannot be won. And so Section 324 would reaffirm America's commitment by committing to reducing our nuclear stockpile by 50% over the next 5 years. This would set an example for not just for Russia, but for the rest of the world, that we're not going to get into another arms race. We're not going to let international tensions prod us into developing, more weapons of mass destruction. We can lead by example. Just show this chart of what our nuclear weapons stockpile has looked like in the past and how well we're doing. Back in the Cuban Missile Crisis and back in the 1960s is when we got to the peak of more than 30,000 nuclear warheads. And over time, we worked on downsizing these. At the end of the Cold War, we came down considerably. And over time, we've continued to reduce the number of warheads that we have. This figure by the National Nuclear Security Administration says that we have 3,750. This is about the 1,800 or so that are deployed and ready to go, and another approximately 2,000 that are retired and awaiting dismantlement, in addition to other warheads that are in storage and in other places that were identified by the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute. So we've continued to reduce our nuclear stockpile, and to a certain extent, this legislation is just codifying sort of what we've already said we want to do, that we have thousands of warheads that are ready for dismantlement. And so this is an opportunity to, as part of a larger package of reforms, as part of a larger commitment to peace in the world, where we can get some public relations credit for committing to further downsizing our nuclear stockpile. A couple of the other things I wanted to bring up is the Pentagon has concluded that when it comes to our objectives for the U.S. deterrence, we can actually reduce our stockpile even further, down to 1,000 nuclear weapons, and meet our deterrence objectives. And let me just share the specifics. So under current law, the National Nuclear Security Administration issues an annual report with reporting on our nuclear stockpile and the status of all of it. And so what this would do is add a new duty to their list of things that they're supposed to, their objectives and the things that they report on. And so specifically require them to develop a plan for reducing by half the total number of warheads that were reported in 2022, and timeline for completing that plan no later than the end of 2027. As the only country to ever use atomic bombs on civilians, we have an opportunity to lead by example, in the opposite direction. A number of things that can be done to reduce the risk of nuclear war, and reducing the number of weapons out there is a good place to start. There's a science fiction book I read years ago called The Coming by Joe Haldeman. There's sort of a terrestrial crisis that gets the whole international community working together. And at the end of the book, it ends with a nuclear agreement among the nuclear powers that no country will have more weapons than any other country. So they could have equal amounts, but nobody can have more than any other country. And so everybody has to kind of de-escalate down to the same level. And then, every once in a while, somebody will get rid of one or two, and then all the other countries will have to follow suit. And it sort of sets a cooperative framework for racing to the bottom, where the bottom is a world without nuclear weapons. And as the joint statement issued earlier this year talked about, that is our stated goal. So the Blueprint for a Better America will help us work towards achieving that goal. And with that, Mr. Chair, I think that concludes my testimony for Section 324, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Yes, we have what I believe is likely a rhetorical question from TC on YouTube, but I'll ask it anyway. Isn't it ironic that you would be covering this issue when we are facing war?
Yes, it is ironic, but it is what it is. Whatever's going on currently, we still need to keep we this year in 2022 in the elections, we have the opportunity to redefine who we want to be as a nation. What are the goals and objectives that we should strive for? And as we start off each of these hearings, Mixed Chair, with the preamble of the Constitution, those are our goals that are written in the Constitution. And so providing for the common defense, we have far exceeded anything that the framers had in mind, and reducing our nuclear stockpile will get us back closer to the framers' intent.
We have an email from Tony in California with a question. It's quite long, so stick with me. Military game theory cannot allow the U.S. to unilaterally disarm its nuclear arsenal. The blueprint should suggest an international coalition and a new treaty between nuclear nations to centralize the decommissioning of nuclear weapons and tie the decommissioning into funding from the IMF or World Bank. This would build international cooperation and allow the US and Russia to decommission older nuclear weapons and gain public relations points globally. It could be utilized as part of a green energy initiative, as the decommissioned materials can be used for nuclear power, modernizing infrastructure of nuclear-armed nations, and be an outreach program for Pakistan and North Korea, and a pathway to better relations with Iran. Wouldn't this be a better option?
I mean, that sounds like a great plan. As there's a lot of nuance and things into those suggestions. And as a legislative package, we're sort of limited on how much nuance we can write into the law. And so that's why we went with the simple solution of just requiring a 50% reduction from whatever our 2022 stockpile is, cutting it in half by the end of 2027. The other thing is, this is not unilaterally disarming our nuclear arsenal. Tony's correct that could be destabilizing as well. This is a purposeful reduction, and again, this section doesn't restrict us from doing any of those things and entering into new coalitions, new treaties, and using the decommissioned material for outreach. But it doesn't get into all those details specifically. It just says, let's cut the stockpile by 50% over 5 years.
I'd like to thank the delegate for his testimony. Specifically, just personally, I feel very strongly about this topic. Feel that given the statements that we've seen from states like Pakistan and North Korea, very explicitly that they develop nuclear weapons in response to the slowing denuclearization of the US and Russia and the extreme militarism of the US and the failure of the US to deliver on its international promises, I think that it doesn't matter who's doing the math. The result is very clear that the de-escalation is not happening fast enough because now we have new nuclear arms states because as a direct cause of how the de-escalation has slowed down. So while I do recognize what Tony highlighted, that unilateral disarmament does have its own international security concerns, and acceleration in disarmament is very important. So that's just something I feel very strongly about personally that I wanted to get out. But thank you again for your testimony.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And I guess one of the other things to emphasize is that, this is a collection of compromises. And so a 50% reduction over 5 years, something that is a reasonable starting ground as opposed to, a 100% reduction. So it's a place to start. Somebody's got to keep the ball rolling, and let it be us.